As you'll probably be aware, in the last, 24 hours? Yeah, last 24 hours. 2 polls have come out. One News Varian poll, which was last night on TVNZ. And then the second poll, of course, was the Radio New Zealand poll that was published this morning. And unsurprisingly, and it's, yes, unsurprisingly, I suppose, the 2 state broadcasters' polls disagree with each other, and quite significantly, I have to say. On one hand, the Radio New Zealand poll, as you might expect, shows that Labour have not a sizable, but a lead over National, and that a combination of Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori would have enough support to form a government if an election were held yesterday, all right? Well, last week. Whereas the One News Varian poll shows exactly the opposite, that National and Labour are down, but the Greens Act, New Zealand First and Te Pāti Māori are all either stable or up. Can I say that the thing that strikes me about both these polls, though, and they'll bounce around as they are, is that the state of the centre-right and the state of the centre-left are relatively what I would call are relatively close. So the next election, if it was to be held now, right now, would be a very close affair indeed, and it would be reliant upon, presumably, the campaign. But the interesting thing is that and here's the next but. National and Labour, if you add them together, the 2 dominant forces in New Zealand politics since 1935, so that's the last 90 years, are actually down to less than 2/3 of the vote. So in other words, over 1/3 of New Zealand, and increasingly a committed over 1/3 of New Zealand, regard neither National nor Labour as their preferred choice of parliament, of political party. And the remarkable thing is that we are starting to get more dispersed and separated from each other politically. And I mean, that's, I suppose, no surprise to you, but the reality is that the Greens and Te Pāti Māori have exactly, if you look at the One News Varian poll of last night, the same amount of support as New Zealand and ACT combined. So the Greens, incredibly, despite everything, 12% of New Zealanders think the Greens are their preferred choice of a political party. Now, it's nothing to do with Chloe Swarbrick. She hovers down at about 3 or 4% of the preferred Prime Minister poll, so it's not obviously reliant to that. But 12% of New Zealand, 12%, regard the Greens as being their preferred choice in this country. And it's something I sort of shake my head at and go, wow, that's sort of like 1 in 8 New Zealanders. How does that happen? On the other hand, New Zealand First and ACT, New Zealand First goes up now to its highest level of support for a long time, I think since, actually for a very long time, years rather than months, at 8%. And you might think, well, that's all due to Winston Peters. No, it's not. Usually Winston Peters' polling numbers in New Zealand First are the same, but he isn't polling as high as his party. In fact, he's polling half the party support of his party. So that goes to show there's something in the New Zealand First message, and I think Shane Jones is going to do a very good job for him in actual fact. But there's something in the New Zealand First message that is in actual fact bigger than Winston, and that would be quite surprising. Usually this has been a cult party, New Zealand First, since its formation in 1992. And when I mean a cult party, the cult of Winston Peters. The most extraordinary, in many ways, politician of our times. I can't think of a politician who's had as enduring an influence in this country and who's never been Prime Minister. But there you go. But nonetheless, the story was that when Winston Peters leaves New Zealand First will be a rather large hole in the ground. Well, no. The issues that they're raising and promoting, and obviously Winston Peters is a good part of that, but it's not just Winston Peters these days. Extraordinary poll last night. Never seen that before. Never, ever seen it. And I worked for Winston. Actually, I'd like to say that I had a bit to do with initially getting his profile up and running way back in the day. But no. New Zealand First support has always been reliant upon Peters. Last night, incredible result. There you go. Listen, I think Christopher Luxon, the Prime Minister, took the right attitude. He said, well, listen, these things go around. I'm just going to carry on. There's not an election tomorrow. I've still got another 18 months to go. And all those things are true. All those things are true. But the centre-right and the centre-left are stronger now than they have been at any time for a long, long time. And they're starting to get entrenched. ACT and New Zealand First voters ain't going anywhere. They're not going back to the centre. They've decided, they've hived off into their separate areas, king camps, and they're not going back to National or anytime soon. Similarly, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, none of their supporters are heading back into the middle anytime soon. They are starting to get entrenched. No, they are entrenched on the left. And it does mean that really, and what does this mean? It means the next election is all about National and Labour. Now, you might say it's always been that way. Yes, but it really is now. And if you think, why does Christopher Luxon take some relatively weak stances on issues? Why doesn't he appear to be a leader's bollocks or whatever it is, whatever, pejorative term you like to use? Truth is, he's having to stay in the centre because he's swapping votes with Labour all the time. And that is the message that comes out of both of those two polls, Radio New Zealand and Emigration. And that is that it's not about the left and the right anymore. You can't convince these people. They've found their camp things very much, and they belong there, and they're happy there, and they are going to stay there. It's all about National and Labour swapping votes. And the really worrying thing for you, if you were in the centre-right, for example, and you're going, oh, well, we always get another 3 years. It's always the nature of the beast. There hasn't been a one-term government since, 72 to 75 Labour, and that was because Norm Kirk died in the middle of it all, which is all true. Everybody gets 2 terms, irrespective of whether they do a good job or a bad one. The thing that you should worry about if you're on the centre-right coalition, National, New Zealand First and ACT, is that it doesn't take many votes to go to bleed from National to Labour for the centre-left to win the next election. And I'm sure the strategists of the National Party know that, which is why they did all the changes this year, and deliberately so, and next year, I don't think you're going to get anything too divisive out of them at all, anything particularly visionary, anything particularly leadership-oriented, anything particularly philosophical or ideological from them next year. You might get that from ACT and you might get that from New Zealand First, and they can afford to be ideological. But National, the result of both those votes is that National and Labour are swapping votes, and when they swap, one of them becomes the government and one of them doesn't. So just watch that. Listen, the other thing that fascinated me to do with last night's poll was the comments of Chloe Swarbrick. And not for perhaps the reasons she might have discerned. The Green Party co-leader noted that the country was going in the wrong direction. And then she said something quite prescient for Chloe. She said, listen, if we were going in the right direction, she said, 191 New Zealanders wouldn't be leaving New Zealand every day. And what she was talking about was that's the net migrant or immigrant versus immigrant number of New Zealanders, all right? 191 Kiwis wouldn't be leaving every day. And I thought to myself, you've recognised that, have you, Chloe? Because I bet and wager that of those 191 Kiwis that are heading somewhere else other than New Zealand, most of them would be voting centre-right. What do you reckon? I'm watching now a New Zealand where the economy is in such a state, and the state of our civil society, that I'm suggesting to you that, we're actually, the people who are going, the best, the brightest, the skilled, the aspirational, the ambitious, the entrepreneurs, the professionals, the ones that are heading off overseas, the skilled builders, the bricklayers, the nurses, The police, the ones that are going, have gone for a reason. And that is because they are ambitious and aspirational for their families and for themselves. They want a better standard of living, and they want perhaps a more civil society, a society in which they feel they fit and belong. And they've obviously decided that New Zealand is not that place. Chloe Swarbrick's observation was right. I think she's noted it for another reason, not because it's a criticism of this current government, but because she knows that with that 191 people moving every day, probably about 180 of them vote, well, National, ACT, New Zealand First. What do you reckon? And so I guess what I'd be worried about if I was the Prime Minister is I need to get this economy working, because I need those people staying, because those are the people who are going to vote for me. The people who are living on benefits, the people who are promised, everything by the Green budget, the people who are, dependent upon the state, whether they are public sector employees or, as I said, the 400,000 beneficiaries. Those people aren't going to move to vote centre-right any time soon, can I say. All I'm saying, Christopher Luxon, is, boy, you need this economy picking up pretty quickly in the next 80 months, because every day there's a flight, and it is your voters on it. I don't mean to scare you, but that you can take would be a reasonable summation of the polls. And if you think that this next election is done and dusted, just have a look at it. Listen, forget the Radio New Zealand one, which you might say is biased. Well, I don't know. These polls bounce around a bit. They're all within roughly 2 or 3% of each other. But if you look at just the One News Varian poll and look at both National and Labour, and you suddenly realise National down 2 points since the last poll, Labour down 3, the centre is not holding in this country. And yet that centre is where the next election will be fought, won and lost. What do you think? Those are my thoughts this morning.